I'm Tim. I'm an alcoholic. And that is the most important aspect of my being. I'm alcoholic. Today I'm a lot of things. I'm a husband. I'm a nurse. I'm a dog dad. All of those things happened for me in recovery. I'm alcoholic. That takes me back. It takes me back to where I started. And if I'm good about it, getting on my knees in the morning and saying, thank you for waking me sober, it puts me in that mindset of, this is where I'm working from. I'm working from a place of humility today. I'm an alcoholic. I've got to keep an eye on my ego. So my outline says, start with the fundamental attitude. I'm just going to close my outline. But I see a lot of folks here that I've reached out to over the years, and I just want to share a story. I was about 6 months sober, and I was living on South Side, and for shock value, I usually say that it was an abandoned building, but I had moved in there and boarded up a window. The pilot light on the water heater didn't work, and I thought that was cool. I would take cold showers. I was getting sober anyway. So with difficulty sleeping, I'd go out and I'd be walking around at odd hours through 5 Points, past all these bars. And there was one night it was really getting to me. I just wanted to drink. I wanted to go into the bar. And in the big book, it refers to, you've got to go to A Vision for You for this, but it was Bill Wilson walking past a bar, and he talks about compassion and release that he saw in that bar. And then on the other side, there's a phone booth with a directory of churches, right? So what's the choice? Am I going to pick up the phone and call somebody, or am I going to go into the bar? And so AA had suggested to me that I pick up the phone and call somebody before I take a drink. It was about 2 a.m., and I called somebody, Thomas Ryan, may he rest in peace. And he picked up the phone at 2 a.m., groggily, and we talked. We talked for probably about an hour. I have no idea what we talked about, but I did not want to drink after that phone call. And I remember he made a point of getting together with me the next day. He was a cigar smoker. We smoked a cigar that evening and went back to where I was staying, and he opened his coat, got this huge cigar, handed it to me, said, hey, I'm not around tomorrow night, but you just sit on your porch, smoke that cigar, and don't drink. So that was the plan. That was about as spiritual as I got at that point. Okay? I had somebody that I respected that helped me give me a plan for the next day. Okay? And I was working with a sponsor at that time. So I had a sponsor and I had a friend in AA at that time. So my date of sobriety is December 30th, 2015. So tomorrow will be 9 years. Man, and I can remember it. Drinking this time 9 years ago. I remember the next day as well, going to a meeting to meet my sponsor and pick up a silver chip. And I don't want to paint him in an unfavorable light, but he doesn't usually use harsh language. But what he said to me before I went into that meeting is, Tim, you need to get the fuck over your rebel without a cause bullshit. And that was pretty well said. So I went in and picked up a silver chip. So I was born in 1986. My first drink was 1994. I verified that with my father. This was my uncle's 25th wedding anniversary banquet in Vancouver, Canada. I was an 8-year-old kid. I think I was in a tux, a little 8-year-old in a tux. And this big, like about as big as this, with white tablecloth, and all of the adults had champagne flutes, and they're going around with these bottles of champagne, filling them up. I didn't have one, and I wanted one, so I leaned over to my dad. I said, Dad, I want one of those. He said, okay. So the waiter comes out with a champagne flute and a can of ginger ale wrapped in a white handkerchief. I'm 8 years old. I know what ginger ale is, so he pours it in there. It's not what I wanted, okay? I knew they were trying to mislead me. So I drank some of the ginger ale, and I reached over and snatched my dad's champagne, poured it into my ginger ale glass, and drank as much of it as I could. And I liked it. I liked the fermentedness. I liked the goldenness, the bubbliness, and I remembered that. Not really consciously, but I did like it. And I liked the grabbing of it, the taking what they were trying to, the taking what all the adults had. I wanted that. And I grew up in fear. I think my father moved out the first time when I was 12 years old. He was abusive to me. Alcohol took away fear. I figured that out pretty quickly. And what the adults had, every chance I got, I tried to get a hold of it. I remember the first time I got enough in my system to really appreciate alcohol and get to that place of freedom. I was 15. And my first drunk, I was 16. And I want to talk about age 16. So this was the second time my dad moved out. There were a couple things going on in my family. Age 16 was my first drunk. It was my first alcohol-related arrest, a mere 5 months after my first drunk. And so then it became my first interaction with AA, court ordered to AA. My first girlfriend, age 16, the first time I had sex, and the first breakup. This sort of became a stuck point for me of this kid that got arrested, put on the ground by two police officers. I was bare, no shirt on, hair down to my mid-back, public drunkenness, disorderly conduct, wearing my motorcycle jacket to the meetings, and, AA was interesting. I was reading philosophies, Friedrich Nietzsche, Jean-Paul Sartre. I was reading everything except what I was assigned to read in the private school that I was attending. And this idea of sort of the man against the world was what I saw myself as. And I read the 12 and 12 in AA, and it just sort of fell in line with those other philosophies. It was an interesting philosophy. It reminded me of the Stoics, and AA was interesting. It's about as much attention as I paid it at that time, except for the mandatory things with the probation and going to the classes and all of the exposure there. So I drank pretty hard all through high school. One of my friends, he was a senior when I was a freshman. Well, he went on to college, and he kept me with a steady supply of alcohol. We sang in a church choir together. And every Wednesday night was sort of my re-up. We'd go to his Volvo and open up the trunk, and I'd hand him a $20 bill, and I'd get a handle of Barton's gin. Like the big book says, bathtub gin. And I would get very irritable when I would get low on that stuff. When the bottle would start to get to the bottom, I'd like to have one at least once a week, but every 2 weeks, fine, and I would just drink it straight in my mom's basement. And I was showing up to school just in all sorts of conditions. My grades were terrible. Like I said, it was a private school. I probably should have been kicked out, but I was part of a family that had been to this school. I knew I had a drinking problem at that age, but I liked it. I liked the drinking problem because it was also a tool and a solution, and every time the fear came up, whatever it was, alcohol took it away. This sort of, I don't know what you want to call it, a mindset of self-sufficiency. I wanted to go into the military. I really wanted to go into the military. I thought that if I could live my life with a system of discipline externally telling me what to do. I could drink for relief and live my life as some sort of hard ass, and not be afraid and just be tough and directed. And so I had this idea of myself, and I wanted to enlist. And like I said, it was a private school, so there were these counselors their entire job was to get you into college. So they sat me down and talked to me about it, and I said, Tim, you don't want to enlist in the military, but we can certainly work on getting you into a military college. And that was great. So I went to a military college for my freshman year of college. This age 16 was a stuck point for me emotionally, because my last drink at age 29, I was in the same mindset as that 16-year-old. I was fearful, just full of... I could realize at age 29 that I had not changed or grown emotionally at all. And I was drinking over the same self-pity, probably about some girl, or just sitting there in my friend's garage, one after the other, just like I was in my mom's basement when I was 16. This freshman year in military college is another stuck point for a very different, and when I say stuck point, I mean I'm frozen in my growth until recovery, when I start to grow up again and go through all sorts of emotions and experiences with no way to handle them without y'all's help. So freshman year of that military college, it was intense and it was good, and very beneficial to me on many levels. But a mere few months into that, October of 2005, my dad was arrested for sex crimes, and I was affected by that. I was very, very affected by that. As I'd said, my dad had moved out a couple times. And let me rewind a little bit. I mean, it's difficult for family members to part. That in itself is difficult, but I look back at that age 16 and I was manipulating both sides. I was the alcoholic. My mom lived in a place and I would get what I wanted from my mom, and my dad was in an apartment. So at some point I started to complain to my dad. He's a physician, he's a surgeon. And I said, Dad, I just can't sleep. School is too stressful and I'm doing bad with all my grades. So he prescribed me Ambien. He prescribed himself a lot of stuff along the way. So Ambien, if you're not a blackout drunk, what I suggest is you chew 4 or 5 Ambien and then drink. You're going to black out and you're going to do some things you regret. You may get arrested. Or later on, you'll hear about this. If you eat a handful of Klonopin and then drink, you're going to black out. And also, I was shoplifting cigarillos from CVS. It might have been still Big B, but it was obvious. I mean, they're right there in the store, so it's like, I want it. I'm not old enough to buy it. I'm going to take it. So you just pocket a few of them, Swishers, whatever, And I had told my dad about it in sort of this salesman pitch, and he started buying me cigarettes. So I was getting booze, or I was getting drugs and cigarettes. And then when he wanted me to hang out at his apartment, I'd say, Dad, yeah, that'd be great. I'd come hang out. Can you have a 6-pack of beer in the fridge? So I'd say I'd be there at 7 o'clock and I'd go there at 6. And I'd just be there at my dad's apartment, just existential me, having 3 beers before my dad gets there. Because then, I got to drink a little slower around my dad. So booze, cigarettes, and beer all for my dad. It was awesome. It was a stuck point, man. I'm telling you, there were times when I look back like that was the golden year, man. Age 16. Just get arrested. And anyway, where was I? Military college, my dad gets arrested. And I don't know how to process it. I don't want to process it. All the things that I'd feared about my father were true, apparently. I could hear my mom on the other end of the phone breaking down, and it was a tremendous pain. This is probably the only way I can describe it. And I was sort of outside that pain, and I wanted to control the pain. It was in my chest and my neck, and I couldn't think straight. But I was just going through the motions, and started to have these conversations with the cadre, and I got some counseling, and eventually made the decision to leave military college to go back home. And nobody liked that decision. I had to go through the chain of command and explain it to everybody. And I was a good recruit. I was wearing 4 ribbons. Everybody else was wearing 1. I was really super recruit, and I sort of left shamefully. And that's also why this part was a stuck point. I'd always look back on this as the time when I quit. And what if I had just stuck it out and endured the pain and just done it better, and waited until I could take that drink and chain smoke, and when I graduate from my first year from the rookie part, and I get my privileges, and I can be the life of the airborne ranger, sex and danger that I wanted to be, So I moved home, and basically everything that my privileged life had been up until this point evaporated. Our house was foreclosed. I moved. There was no income from my father. He did get out of jail fairly quickly, but he was a broken person. I knew my dad growing up as an angry, hard-charging, powerful, dominant man, and he was just broken, and he had he just looked limp, and he didn't work for quite some time. And I moved into a 2-bedroom apartment with my mom with all of her stuff, which it was cluttered, but lots of places to hide alcohol, beer, liquor, wine, whatever. And this is this is when I like to look on these next few years as like my life becomes like Forrest Gump. I just sort of keep showing up to these things. I'm drinking all the time, and I find myself in these incredible situations. So for instance, I applied to Birmingham Southern College, which no longer exists, right? And it no longer exists because of the financial crisis it had. Well, I benefited from that because when I applied, they gave me this huge scholarship for no reason. So I'm at home, beer and pizza, computer games, living with my mom, get a huge scholarship to go drink more beer, basically. I am a talented singer, and I've got a loud voice, a clear voice. I've always had a knack for it, and one of my professors was particularly interested, and he said, you should do a Bachelor of Music degree. So Forrest Gump did the Bachelor of Music degree, drinking all the way, and I got a little interested in it myself, and my mother had always had these aspirations of being a singer herself. And my ego got engaged, which it was a very powerful ego, and I applied to these internships, and I got accepted to some pretty prestigious internships for a college student, Wolf Trap Opera in Virginia. So I was actually getting paid to sing opera at a fairly young age, 21, 22. And I would go there in the summers, and then I'd come back, and I was too cool for school, to use a cliche. I mean, I was just doing my own thing, and it involved just a lot of solitary work on music and drinking, and barely passing some classes, but doing it and getting through. And I was applying to graduate schools because that was the next step on this journey, and I was accepted to the Juilliard School of Music in New York, and so Forrest Gump shows up in New York, or the Rebel Without a Cause goes to New York, the outlaw safecracker in the Big Book goes to New York. Sex, drugs, and opera. The first year was a major charge, man. I was going. I was noticed. I got some exposure. I had performances. I had a write-up in the New York Times. I this might have been the first time I felt like I'd arrived. It made sense. This is why I left military college. It all timed out perfectly for me to have this moment to become a star. I was interpolating this kind of meaning on my life. Me, myself. I wasn't asking God, what's the meaning of my life? I wasn't asking anybody else, what's the meaning of my life? I was determining the meaning of my own life. I was the existential hero. I was going to be a jet setter. I was going to go from town to town and drink and do my incredible performances, blow everybody's mind, and then just go drink, There's a lot of debauchery I could share about that first year. The second year was a bit more of a slog. I went dry, okay? They had provided me with enough opportunities to where if I continued to drink the way that I was drinking, there was no way that I could meet these opportunities. It was a lot of demands for rehearsals, performances, coachings, around the clock, all of these different opinions about how you should do 4 measures. You're going to talk to 10 people in one day about your 4 measures. And then the discipline of that kind of height of musical craftsmanship was remarkable. I mean, I had it a little bit easier than the instrumentalists. A violinist and a pianist, they've got to practice 16 hours a day. A vocalist, the actual instrument can only handle it for probably 4 hours a day. So do my 4 hours of practice, learn my arias, and go drink, I had all the good spots figured out, and I hung out with the low brass guys. I didn't hang out with any singers. The low brass guys were my speed. We would drink, We found the places that had the big steeds, the Miller on draft, not Miller Life. No. Michelob. Michelob on draft, not Michelob Light, just Michelob. $1.50, a big old frosty, Big Nicks. Like I said, that second year, though, I was dry. I had made this decision, and I made it nearly a year, very insane, very exhausted, completely worn out, and I fell off the wagon. Fell off the water wagon, as they say in the big book, and fell off hard, really hard, instantly back into just going down the block, getting a bottle of liquor and loading up for everything. And I was in rehearsals drunk. I was throwing temper tantrums. I was just showing up in whatever sort of condition. And I very sort of quickly started to burn these opportunities to the ground, showing up in auditions with a bad attitude and just saying sarcastic, biting things. Part of this existential hero syndrome or whatever, one of the things that I've often reflected on is I sang for James Levine, and I thought that was really remarkable. So, and it was an interesting moment because I felt like I was singing for the devil himself, and I wanted to sell my soul. So, you guys know who Harvey Weinstein is, the Me Too guy. James Levine is basically the Harvey Weinstein of opera, one of the most powerful men there in New York at the time. And so everybody wanted to bow to him and be around him. And so did I. And I just thought that was my story. I thought that my story was going to this place of ego glorification and getting what I wanted. So moving on, I drank, I crashed and burned. I got my degree from Juilliard, the piece of paper, and I moved home to Birmingham and lived with my mom. Broke, in debt, depressed, a failure again. What do I do? Well, what makes sense to me is to get a job as an auto mechanic. Opera singer turned auto mechanic. sounds pretty good. So I started working part-time for, I'm pretty sure, one of my mom's ex-boyfriends. 3 days a week, and twisting wrenches, and learning a few things, and really, really getting into it, and drinking a lot of beer, smoking a lot of cigarettes. Sometimes refer to these as my Leonard Skinner years. I was moved out to a place in Leeds, and I got another job that I thought was a step up. I got fired from that job, and then I got another job where I stuck around for a little while. Acme Muffler and Brake. I was welding mufflers and learning some more light mechanical, and this was another time where I felt like I'd arrived. Everything had lined up now to where my life is about my drinking. I work, I make a paycheck, I go to the bar, I drive home drunk, I come back, I do it all over again. And it was great because I had all this sort of existential angst built up that I could kind of ruminate over while I was drinking, and kind of use it in a way of to get what I wanted from whatever, barmaids or whatever. It was, I talked about the fear. It was only the second time that my boss asked me if I was drinking in the morning that the fear came back. I remember it, and this guy that fired me is a nod to recovery. He was at my wedding. Ricky was at my wedding. He's actually a very good friend. But so he asked me, and I got afraid, and so I tried this approach of moderating and not drinking as much, and I was getting real irritable and throwing tools around, and I was just being an asshole. And he fired me, and this was a big blow. I really loved that job. I really liked that job. I wanted to stay there. I wanted to turn into that cranky old drunk chain-smoking bastard that knew how to fix a car. That's what was on my mind at that point. And he fired me, and I felt devastated. And it was right before this trip I was going to take. I went out to New Mexico, saw an old girlfriend, did some fly fishing, and came back. And it's like, what the fuck do I do now? So I started looking for some other jobs, and I took the first thing that really materialized. I took a job doing hardscapes, patios, and retaining walls. So basically digging ditches, a lot of digging ditches. So how would you feel if you have a master's degree from Juilliard and you're digging ditches? Well, I felt very terrible about myself. I thought, if I met anybody, and they knew what I had accomplished, and here they see me, they could be the owner of this house, they see me digging this ditch, wouldn't they think, man, if he had just done some things better, then he would be living a much, if he could have just handled himself better. So that's what I was feeling about myself, Looking back on it, I didn't have much of a choice. From one thing to the next, and the way that I was drinking, I didn't have any choice. I was, things were being chosen for me. This willpower that I imagined I had, it was just trying to make other people happy, and then drink and drink and drink. So at this point, this was some sort of bottom here, digging ditches with a master's degree. I started to ask for help. I reached out to a few folks that I knew. Of course, I had this music background, so basically networking musicians that I knew. And I met with one guy I met him and I was drinking and smoking cigarettes, and it turns out he was in AA. He was an important musician in Birmingham, but he was in AA. And he said, you can come to an AA meeting with me anytime you want. And I let that one go for a little while. I wasn't going to take up on that offer immediately. But I ran into this other guy who was helping me put my experience onto paper. You know, I'm a pretty smart guy, but stupid about some other things. So as far as like going to a job interview and saying, this is what I'm good at, he helped me put it on a resume and like change worked construction during college to, you know, critical thinking or whatever. He was helping me do that. And he was in AA. So at some point I did come back to AA and met my friend there in the group of Day by Day. And my experience of sort of handing my life over to AA began at that point. That was in 2014. It wasn't easy for me to hand my life over to AA. I was angry. I was an atheist. I wasn't sure that I wanted to stop drinking, but I had absolutely ruined every opportunity that I'd had, ruined every relationship that I'd had. Last person I'd want to talk to was my father, or even my mother. My mother is a generous, kind soul. She's a little crazy, but just lots of hang-ups on that whole, what we call resentments. I didn't have that vocabulary yet for what AA means with resentment. So I was going to stay away from the mechanic shop, do some other kinds of work, and I got into sales. First retail, and then the ego comes back. And all right, I'm a great salesman. I'm going to get a big job at a big firm. It's like something out of the Big Book. And I did. I got with this company. They sent me to Fort Worth. They trained me. I was not drinking. I was out on the fire escape, chain smoking Lucky Strikes, and came back to Birmingham to try to sell grease and oil. And I, as a dry drunk, my experience with it is I sort of slide into this anxious, manic, do-it-all mode, right? And sort of that pain that I described was coming back in the chest and the neck, and, you know. So I sought some other sorts of help, psychiatry, and I was prescribed medications, and I very quickly began to abuse the medications. Klonopin in particular, was eating them, you know, by the handful. And like I said, that's a good way to black out. There were massive stretches where where I would go make a sales call and I'd be talking to somebody in some plant about stuff that I really didn't know about. And it was just bizarre. And I was still angry, and I actually tried to get back into the military again at this point. I enlisted in the Marines, and I went to MEPS, and then they found out about the Klonopin, and then also my eye motility issue. They were concerned about that. So all of this paperwork started, and the recruiters actually gave up on it. So this was in 2015, and other than making an ass of myself at my brother's wedding, I came back home and I did something very bad. And I got a call. I came to, and I got a call from a lawyer from, it was the lawyer that got my dad out of jail. He called me. And he said, Tim, you need to go to the emergency room and request a voluntary psychiatric evaluation. Why would I want to do that? And he told me why I would want to do that and what the alternative would be if I didn't. So I did, and ate a few Klonopin before I went down there, barred out in the waiting room, and I remember getting back, and they took my EKG. You know, benzos lower your blood pressure and your heart rate, so my EKG was like 41 beats a minute. The nurse said, well, this is kind of weird, but looks good, though. It's weird, but good. And I remember just turning over in that stretcher and falling asleep, like blissfully asleep. And there was a sense of relief, like something real is happening now about this pain that I have. So I woke up, they put handcuffs on me, and I went to the psych ward. I went to the psych ward for 15 days, and you know the movie One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest? Well, I was Jack Nicholson, okay? There were a lot of interesting things in the psych ward, a lot of things that I'd like to share to you, but one takeaway, the galvanizing moment, one of them in my alcoholism, was I was meeting with this psychiatrist every day to talk to him, and ranting and raving about all this stuff, you know, acute mania the first few days, you know, just nuts. And he had found some stuff on the internet about me being an opera singer, and he had pointed a few of these things out. I think he took an interest in me. And he was one of the head psychiatrists. He had people under him doing all kinds of things. We'd meet and have these talks, and I was begging for Thorazine, something to turn my frontal. Just shut me down, man. Put me away, shut me down somewhere. I'm a danger to society. I know it. And he looked at me, and he said, the only thing that's going to help you is the 12 steps. That was the doctor's opinion for me, okay? Face to face. And I heard it, and I heard it really well. And I knew what that meant. I was just going to have to get out of there if the judge approved and work these damn 12 steps. So sure enough, the case against me was dropped. And what I'm very grateful to this doctor for is he discharged me without a diagnosis. It was unspecified mood disorder. And the lawyer across the table was going after that. What is an unspecified mood disorder? And he just basically said he didn't want to label the patient, you know, for his future prospects or whatever. You know, I was expecting to leave there with some label about myself, about my mental condition. But really what I left with was a clarity, further clarification that I'm an alcoholic. And there's a solution for me if I'm willing to try it. 9 years of sobriety. A lot of good stuff. So I bought a home in sobriety, and that was, I had all these different streams of income. I think I had 7 different jobs in my first 2 years of sobriety, and trying to put all the income together and get a mortgage, it seemed impossible. But there was a mortgage guy in AA. I talked to him, and he said, just bring it all by. We'll sit down. Let's go over it. And he worked with me for about a year, and he got me a mortgage. A brother in AA that I am grateful to. I was an active member of AA at this point, and I was taking these steps the best that I could. I didn't do them perfectly. I want to share that at some point. But, at some point I took a job in a clinic, and for whatever reason, just helping folks out felt good. And I remember this moment working in that clinic. I'm sorry, I'm not keeping it together. But, these exam rooms, they've got these windows, mirrors. And I remember looking myself in the mirror, and for the first time in a long time, I thought I looked like a good guy. So I felt like I had a knack, even though all I was doing was just checking these people in and taking their blood pressure. And I went to nursing school, and I'm a nurse now, and I work in an emergency room. And every once in a while, there's an opportunity to intervene in a crisis or a trauma or other things that will remind me of myself. It's a way to give back. It's a way to work the 12th step. And I got married in sobriety. And this is what I did for my whole wedding. I blubbered. Oh, man. So I wasn't very good at relationships. And so the point I'm trying to make here is each of these things had something to do with AA. I got real close to a guy who had just gotten divorced, and a good guy, and we would hang out, and I'd listen to him, and he'd basically tell me what not to do, and I was struggling with the courtship thing, and if I was going to write a text or get upset about something, I'd run it by this guy first, my AA friend, and he would show me a better way to write the text. He helped me with the dating process and the courtship process. Invaluable. And, Katie made it easy. She's an angel. And I guess I'll end here with an anecdote about what can still happen to me in sobriety, very similar to what happened when I was drinking, is when the ego gets a hold of something and takes charge, and I lose my conscious contact. In other words, I lose my gratitude for that state of being, that I'm an alcoholic. I lose my gratitude for the fact that I have an opportunity to be recovered today. When my ego gets a hold of something. And so a couple months ago, I thought it would be a great idea to buy a sports car and just drive it really fast. I was a little stressed out about work. You guys heard me sharing this meeting about me getting fired about 6 months ago from a hospital, and then having to be humbled and get another job and start all over and work on my interpersonal skills and go to therapy and all that. You've heard all that story. I just wanted this car. It was a beautiful car, and I wanted to drive fast. So I did. And I enjoyed it for about 2 weeks, and I totaled it. I was in a rollover car accident, and, I went to the place where I worked for all the scans, and, everybody was asking me, well, does, time slows down? For me, it was all real time. It was terrifying. It was, the world was upside down, the glass flying, the pops, the hisses, the smashing, the crunching. And I was holding onto the steering wheel, and I was screaming, God, please help me. God, please help me. And I guess he did, because I got out of the car and I walked around, and I hugged the lady of the car that I had hit. I had swerved to avoid it. And then I hugged the folks across the street. I tried to hug the police officer. I had never seen anybody take fault for an accident so fast, too. I'm lost. I don't know. And I saw him try to swerve. And, so it was... Anyway, I went back to work the next night and the night after that. And on that second night, we had this kid come in who was gunshot wound, dropped off at the front door. We bring him back, put him in a wheelchair. We're going to get him stabilized, put a seat collar in, and we're seat collar on, and we're all curious how he's still talking to us, because just below, the base of the skull is the entrance, and the exit is here, so through and through. And he's hemodynamically stable, and we're just basically watching him until anesthesia gets here. We're assuming the worst. We're assuming there's some internal bleeding, tamponade, something that we don't know about. But he's in good condition. And we're all just kind of standing around like, what's next? Anesthesia's not here yet. I take this kid's hand and I start talking to him, And after the intubation, and I'm looking at checking the IV where I'm running an anesthetic, and I see this tattoo, and it was an interesting tattoo, and everything. It was as if the bullet had missed everything. We saw the X-ray; it didn't even hit the facets. There was no bleeding. It missed the arteries. The trachea was intact. The intubation was easy. So, what I'm getting at is that week I feel like I experienced two miracles. Anyway, this tattoo, I was very interested in it, and I sort of made an impression on me, and I went and did a little reading about it, and the image of it is an ankh, which is a cross with a loop on top of it. And the reading I did on it suggested that it is an ancient symbol which signifies eternal life. So that made an impression on me. And the point I'd like to make to you is that you don't have to believe anything in AA. You just have to take the spiritual experiment one day further. And with the information that I have, I plan on doing that. And I'm glad to be here, glad to see all of you. Thank you.